The founding festival filled the Academy with light and music, and thousands of spectators from across the Galactic Union, dignitaries from 47 species gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall, and politicians and generals and corporate leaders mingled, while holographic displays celebrated 3,000 years of military excellence. No one noticed 6 cadets slipping away from the celebrations. Squad 17 moved through corridors that grew older and darker with every turn, and Saileth guided them using maps she had memorized from restricted archives, and the walls changed from polished metal to ancient stone. The Forbidden's archive should be just ahead, she whispered. Grendish took point, and his massive form barely fitting through the narrow passages, and Varath's thermal vision scanned for guards but found none. The entrance was sealed with a lock that required both genetic verification and a command code. We cannot get through this, Kelish said. Una smiled. Watch me. She pulled a small device from her pocket, and it was a gift from Instructor Cavil, who had visited her in the medical bay, and pressed it into her hands without explanation. The lock clicked open. Remind me to thank him if we survive this, Grendish muttered. The archives were vast shelves of data crystals, stretched toward a ceiling lost in darkness, and holographic terminals flickered with information that had been hidden for centuries. We need to find Calith via's evidence, Una said, and she said she hid it here. They split up and searched with desperate efficiency. Mira found it. Hidden behind a false panel in the deepest section of the archives was a collection of data, crystals and physical documents and holographic recordings. The first recording showed Commandant Zorvith meeting with representatives from major galactic powers, and they were discussing quotas and agreements about which species would be allowed to produce officers and which would be suppressed. They have been controlling military leadership for 3,000 years. Saileth breathed. The documents were worse. They contained lists of cadets who had been eliminated, and the methods used ranged from staged training accidents to quiet assassinations, and every death had been approved by the Academy's board of directors. 17 in 30 years was just Squad 17. Lorath hissed. The total number across all squads is in the thousands. Una felt sick, but she kept reading. The deepest secret was the Academy's founding charter, and it had not been created to train officers. It had been created to ensure that only certain species would ever hold military power, and humanity was on the list of species to be permanently excluded. We need to get this information out, Una said. You will not be getting anything out. Commandant Zorvith stood in the entrance with Academy security forces arrayed behind him. His crystalline form blazed with colors of fury and cold calculation. I warned you, Cadet Park, and I offered you a peaceful solution, and you chose this instead. I chose the truth. The truth is that this system has maintained galactic stability for 3 millennia. And do you really believe your little squad can destroy what generations have built? We can try, Zorith gestured, and security forces moved forward. Take them and make sure they disappear, just like all the others. Grendish charged, and he was a wall of muscle and fury that scattered the first wave of guards like leaves in a storm. Saileth moved with blinding speed, and her 4 arms, disarming opponents with precise strikes. Varth coiled around enemies and squeezed until they stopped fighting. But there were too many guards, and slowly the squad was pushed back. Una clutched the data crystals, and she knew they would never make it to the surface. Then she remembered the festival. The Grand Assembly Hall was connected to the Academy's main broadcast system, and every ship and station and planet in Union space would be watching the celebration. I have an idea, she shouted, but I need you to trust me. We trust you, Grendish roared as he threw another guard across the room. Una ran. She ran through corridors she had never seen, and she followed emergency signs toward the assembly hall, and she could hear guards pursuing her, and she could hear her squadmates fighting to give her time. She burst into the hall from a service entrance, and the brilliant lights blinded her for a moment. Thousands of faces turned toward her, and cameras focused on the bloodied human cadet with wild eyes and desperate determination. She ran to the main stage and shoved aside a diplomat who was mid-speech and grabbed the broadcast controls. "My name is Una Park, and I am a human cadet, and I have evidence that the Galactic Union Academy has been systematically eliminating cadets and controlling military leadership for 3,000 years. She activated the data crystals and projected their contents onto every screen in the hall and transmitted them to every receiver in range. Names and dates and methods of execution scrolled across displays that had moments ago shown celebration. Faces of the disappeared appeared beside the families who had never received answers. The founding charter with its list of suppressed species glowed for all to see. The hall erupted in chaos. Zorvith reached the stage and his form blazing with fury. "You have destroyed everything. I have told the truth, and the universe can decide what to do with it." Security forces surrounded her, and she waited for the end. It did not come. Instead, the delegates from 12 different species stepped forward, and they demanded investigations and tribunals and answers. The revelation that their own people had been suppressed created alliances that had never existed before. Zorvith was seized by his own guards, and the board of directors was taken into custody, and the ancient system began to crumble. Squad 17 found Una on the stage, and they were battered and bruised but alive and victorious. Grandish's scales glowed with colors of pride and joy, and triumph. Saleth's feathers were raised in celebration. Vareth coiled around them all in something that might have been an embrace. Kalish and Miro stood shoulder to shoulder with grins on their faces. "We did it," Kalish said. "We actually did it. We did it together." Una corrected. 1 year later, the academy had been rebuilt under new leadership, and the corrupt board was facing tribunals across the galaxy, and cadets from 12 previously excluded species walked the halls for the first time. Una Park stood at the main shuttle platform, and she wore the uniform of a man academy officer now, and she watched a new class of cadets arrive. Among them was a young human male, and his eyes were wide with wonder and fear and hope. He spotted her and approached nervously. "Officer Park, and I am Cadet Jin Woo, and I just wanted to say that you are the reason I am here, and you changed everything." Una smiled and remembered standing in the same spot a year ago and feeling the weight of her entire species on her shoulders. "I did not change everything alone, and I have my squad, and now you will have yours. What if they do not accept me?" Una put her hand on his shoulder. "Then you make them accept you, and you do it with kindness and patience and the stubborn refusal to give up that makes you as human." She looked out over the arriving cadets, and she saw species that had been enemies for centuries learning to stand together. "We are stronger together, and that is the lesson this place forgot, and that is the lesson we will never let them forget again." Jin Woo straightened, and determination replaced the fear in his eyes. "I will not let you down. I know you will not." She watched him join his new squad mates, and she watched old barriers begin to fall, and she knew that somewhere in the galaxy more walls were crumbling. The human cadet in the alien academy had altered everything, and this was only the beginning. The medical bay smelled like antiseptic and ozone, and Una Park had grown to hate that smell over the past 3 days. Her shoulder was healing quickly, and the academy's medical technology was far beyond anything on Earth. But the doctors insisted she remain for observation. She did not mind the rest, but she minded being separated from her squad. Saleth visited every day, and she brought reports on their ranking and news from the other cadets, and most importantly, she brought the results of her research. "I found something disturbing," the Kithrani said on the third morning, settling into the chair beside Una's bed. "More disturbing than being attacked by fellow cadets. Much more, and I started looking into Squad 17's history after what Instructor Cavill told us about." Deliberate placement. Saleth's feathers pressed flat against her skull in distress. In 30 years, no cadet from Squad 17 has ever graduated, and most were expelled, but some simply vanished, and the official records say they withdrew voluntarily. You do not believe that. I traced 17 cases where cadets allegedly withdrew, and in every case, the cadet's family reported that they never arrived home, and in every case, the investigation was closed without resolution. Una sat up despite the pain in her shoulder. You are saying they were killed. I am saying they disappeared, and I am saying the academy covered it up. The door slid open, and Grendish entered with Varth coiled around his shoulders. We have more. The Vorkai warrior said, I contacted my former clan, and they revealed that my assignment to Squad 17 was arranged by High Commander Velthros himself, and he is the one who stripped my clan of status when I reported his corruption. Varth hissed softly. My government contacted the academy directly to ensure I was placed here, and they want my genetic research to disappear with me. Kelesh and Miro arrived next, and their faces grim. Our families received warnings before we were assigned. Kelesh said, threats disguised as condolences for our inevitable failure. Una's mind was racing. Someone is using Squad 17 as a disposal system, and they send cadets they want eliminated, and then they arrange for those cadets to fail or disappear. It goes higher than that. Saleth said, I found records suggesting that Commandant Zorvith himself approves every Squad 17 assignment, and he has final authority over which cadets are placed here. Then we need to confront him. Grendish shook his massive head. He will deny everything, and we have no proof. Then we find proof. The confrontation came 2 days later when Una was released from the medical bay. Commandant Zorvith summoned her to his office, and it was a circular room at the top of the crystal spire with windows that looked out over the entire academy. The Shelleran stood with his back to her, and colors rippling through his transparent form in patterns she could not read. Cadet Park and I understand you and your squad have been asking questions. We have. That is inadvisable. Una stood her ground. 17 cadets have disappeared from this academy in the past 30 years, and all of them were from Squad 17, and all of their investigations were closed without resolution. Zorvith turned, and the colors in his form shifted to something cold and sharp. You are making dangerous accusations. I am stating facts, and I would like to know why cadets are being sent to Squad 17 specifically to fail. The Commandant moved closer, and his crystalline body caught the light from the windows and scattered it across the walls. You are young, and you do not understand how the galaxy works, and there are powers that have guided the development of civilizations for millennia, and they do not appreciate interference. Powers like the Academy. The Galactic Union Academy has existed for 3,000 years, and it has trained officers from dozens of species and shaped the military leadership of entire civilizations. And do you really believe such an institution could exist without certain arrangements? What kind of arrangements? Zorvith made a sound that might have been a sigh. Powerful families contribute to the Academy, and in return, we ensure their interests are protected, and sometimes that means removing obstacles, and your squad mates are obstacles. And so are you. You are admitting this to me. I am offering you a choice, and you have proven yourself resourceful, and I respect that, and I am willing to make a deal. What deal? Abandon your investigation and complete your training quietly, and I will ensure you graduate with honors and receive a posting that protects you from those who want humanity excluded from galactic affairs. And my squadmates, they will receive similar protections, and all you need to do is forget what you have learned. Una felt the weight of his offer pressing against her. It would be so easy to accept and to walk away from the conspiracy and to protect herself and her squad and to graduate and make humanity proud. But she thought of the 17 cadets who had disappeared, and she thought of the families who never learned what happened, and she thought of every future cadet who would be fed into This machine. No. The colors in Zorvith's form flared with surprise. You refuse. I refuse, and I will not be silenced, and I will not abandon the others who have been hurt by this system. You cannot win this fight, and the powers behind the Academy have existed longer than your species has been walking upright. Maybe, but humans are stubborn, and we do not know when to quit. She turned to leave, and found her squad mates waiting in the corridor. All of them Grendish stood like a wall of muscle, and scale and Salith's feathers were raised in defiance, and Varth coiled ready to strike, and Kalish and Miro flanked them with determination in their eyes. We heard everything. Salith said, "The doors are not as soundproof as the Commandant believes." Varth added. Yuna looked at them, and her heart swelled. "Then you know what we are up against." Grendish's scales shifted to the deep red of battle readiness. "We know. And we are with you." They walked out of the crystal spire together, and Commandant Zorvith watched them go with something like curiosity flickering through his crystalline form. That night, they received an encrypted message from an unknown source. It contained coordinates to a location deep within the Academy's oldest section, and a section the cadets were forbidden to enter, and a section called the Forbidden's Archives. The message was brief, but its contents made Yuna's blood run cold. "I discovered what you are discovering 20 years ago, and I tried to expose it, and they made me disappear, but before they took me, I hid the evidence, and everything you need is in the archives, and trust no one but each other." The signature was a name that Saleth recognized, Kalith Verar, and she was a cadet in squad. 1722 years ago, and the records say she withdrew voluntarily. Obviously she did not. Yuna looked at her squad. "The founding festival is in 3 days, and the entire Academy will be distracted, and that is when we go to the archives. This could get us expelled or worse." Kalish said, "I know, and if anyone wants to walk away, I will not hold it against you." No one moved. Grendish put his massive hand on Yuna's uninjured shoulder. "You said we are family, and family does not abandon each other." Saleth nodded. "The Kithrani believe that some truths are worth dying for, and this feels like one of those truths." Varth uncoiled slightly. "My people tried to bury the truth about our origins, and I will not be part of burying another truth." Kalish and Miro stepped forward together. "We are tired of being afraid." Yuna felt tears threatening, and she blinked them back. "Then in 3 days we find out what they have been hiding." She looked toward the crystal spire, where Commandant Zorvith's office glowed against the night sky, "and then we burn it all down." The human cadet in the alien academy altered everything. Part 3. The drop pod hit the frozen surface of Glaceth with enough force to rattle Yuna's teeth and send her squad sprawling across the interior. Through the viewport, she could see a landscape of endless white, broken only by jagged mountains of black ice, and the distant glow of an aurora that painted the sky in shades of green and purple. It was beautiful and deadly, and they had 7 days to cross it. "Everyone check your gear," Yuna called out as she pulled herself to her feet. The responses came quickly, and Grendish reported his armor intact, and Varath confirmed his thermal suit was functioning, and Salith's navigation equipment was operational. Then the pod's cargo bay doors opened, and everything changed. Where their supply crates should have been, there was only twisted metal and scattered debris and the acrid smell of burned electronics. "The supplies," Saleth whispered. "They are destroyed." Grendish's scales darkened to the color of barely contained rage. This was no accident. He was right, and Yuna knew it immediately. Someone had sabotaged their equipment, and someone wanted Squad 17 to die on this frozen moon. "We have what we are carrying and nothing else," Yuna said, "so we need to move now before the temperature drops further." Vorath was already shivering despite his thermal suit. "I will not survive long in these conditions, and my metabolism requires external heat sources. Then we find shelter. First in Saleth, can you identify any cave systems nearby?" The The Kithrani consulted her navigation device and her forearms moving with practiced precision. There is a cavern network, approximately 3 kilometers north, and the thermal readings suggest geothermal activity below the surface. That is our destination, and Grendish, you take point, and everyone else stay close. They moved across the ice in a tight formation, and the wind howled around them like something alive and hungry. Yuna kept her eyes on Vorath, and she watched his movements grow slower and more labored as the cold seeped through his protective gear. 2 kilometers into their march, the Deshan collapsed. "I cannot continue," he hissed. "The cold is too deep, and my systems are shutting down." The other 2 cadets, whose names were Kalish and Miro, exchanged a look. "We could move faster without him," Kalish said quietly. Yuna turned on him with an intensity that made even Grendish step back. "We do not leave anyone behind, and that is not negotiable." "But the mission parameters?" "I do not care about parameters, and I care about us, and right now that means I carry Vorath." Before anyone could argue, she bent down and lifted the serpentine alien across her shoulders. He was heavy and awkward, and his coils wrapped instinctively around her torso. For warmth, Saleth stared at her. "You cannot carry him for 3 kilometers in this weather. Watch me." It was the hardest thing Yuna had ever done. Each step was agony, and the ice cut through her boots, and the wind tried to knock her down, and Varath's weight pressed against her spine like a crushing hand, but she kept moving because that was what humans did. They endured. They reached the caverns as the sun set, and the temperature plummeted to levels that would have killed an unprotected human in minutes inside the caves. Geothermal vents provided warmth, and Yuna laid Vorath near the largest vent and watched as color slowly returned to his scales. "You saved my life," he whispered. "We save each other, and that is how this works." The squad made camp, and they rationed their limited food supplies, and they set watches through the night. On the second day, they started moving through the cave system toward the extraction point, and Saleth's memory allowed her to navigate the twisting passages without hesitation. On the third day, they encountered the mauler. It was waiting at the exit of the caves, and it was the largest predator Yuna had ever seen. 6 legs supported a body covered in white fur, and its eyes glowed with a cold intelligence that suggested this was no simple beast. It had been hunting them since they arrived. "Standard protocol is to evade," Grendish said, "but it is blocking our only exit. Then we fight," Kalish said, reaching for his weapon. "Wait." Yuna said she was studying the mauler, and something about its behavior was wrong. It was not attacking, and it was positioned defensively rather than aggressively, and behind it, she could hear sounds that did not match a predator. They were soft, whimpering sounds. "It is protecting something." She moved forward slowly, and her squad mates hissed warnings, but she did not stop. The mauler growled, but held its position, and Yuna could now see past it into a small alcove where 3 smaller forms lay huddled together. Maulers young, and they were injured, and one of them was barely moving. "It is not hunting us," Yuna said. "It is guarding its children." She reached into her pack and pulled out half of her remaining food rations. "What are you doing?" Saleth demanded. "Something stupid, probably." She placed the food on the ground between herself and the mauler, and then she stepped back slowly with her hands visible and her posture as non-threatening as she could make it. The mauler watched her with those glowing eyes, and then it moved not toward her, but toward the food, and it sniffed once before gathering the rations in its massive jaws and carrying them to its young. Then it stepped aside, and the path was clear. "How did you know it would not attack?" Grendish asked as they moved past. "I did not know, and I guessed." "That was insane." "Probably, but sometimes the insane choice is the right one." They made camp that night in a sheltered valley, and Saleth sat beside Yuna near the fire. On Kithro, we are taught that predators are predictable, and that they kill or are killed, and there is no other way. And now, I am not so sure, and you showed mercy to a creature that could have killed you, and it showed mercy in return, and that should not be possible. Una smiled. On Earth we have a saying about catching more flies with honey than with vinegar. I do not understand what insects have to do with this. It means kindness is often more effective than violence. Day 6 brought a new threat. They were crossing an open ice field when another squad emerged from the swirling snow. It was Squad 3, and they were the Academy's top-ranked cadets, and they were armed. Squad 17. The leader called out. What a surprise to find you still alive. Una stepped forward. We are just trying to reach the extraction point. Unfortunately, that is going to be a problem, and you see our sponsor has offered a significant bonus if you fail to complete this evaluation. You would attack fellow cadets for money. The leader smiled. We would do it for free, but the money is a pleasant bonus. They attacked without warning, and the ice field became a battlefield. Grendish met their warriors head-on, and his massive fists sending enemies flying across the frozen ground. Seleth used her speed and agility to dodge attacks and strike from unexpected angles. Varath had recovered enough to coil around enemies and squeeze until they submitted, but Squad 3 was better trained and better equipped, and slowly they pushed Squad 17 back. Then the leader drew his blade and he lunged not at Una, but at Grendish, who was occupied with 2 other attackers. Una saw it happening and she did not think she moved. The blade meant for Grendish's unprotected back found Una's shoulder instead, and the pain was immediate and overwhelming, and red blood spilled onto the white ice. She fell and the world blurred around her, and she could hear screaming, but she could not tell if it was her voice or someone else through the haze. She saw her squad mates, and they had stopped fighting individually, and now they moved as one unit. Grendish roared with rage and his scales burning crimson as he charged. The enemy leader Saleth coordinated the defense and her forearms, directing movement like a conductor leading an orchestra. Varath protected Kelish and Miro and his coils forming a living shield around the wounded. They fought together, and they fought for each other, and they fought for her when Squad 3 finally retreated and their leader, dragging his unconscious members behind him. Squad 17 stood victorious. Elth knelt beside Una and pressed medical supplies against the wound. You took a blade for him, and why would you do that? Una smiled through the pain. Because he is my family, and I would do it for any of you. Grendish loomed over her, and his scales now shifting through colors she had never seen. No one has ever protected me before. Get used to it. The extraction shuttle found them on day 7, and Squad 17 had completed the evaluation intact as the medical officer treated her wound. Una looked at her squad mates, and they looked back at her. Something had changed on that ice field, and they all knew it. They were no longer strangers forced together by circumstance. They were family forged in fire and blood and snow, and they were just getting started. The human cadet in the alien academy altered everything. Part 2. 3 weeks had passed since Una Park arrived at the academy, and Squad 17 was still a disaster. They had survived the first academic examination by the narrowest of margins, and only because Una had stayed awake for 40 hours straight to memorize every tactical scenario in the database. Her squad mates had noticed. They had not thanked her, but they had noticed now a bigger challenge loomed before them. The survival evaluation would drop each squad on a hostile moon called Glacith, where temperatures fell far below freezing and predators hunted anything that moved. Squads had 7 days to reach an extraction point on the far side of the moon, and any squad that lost even one member would fail the entire evaluation. Squad 17 had never completed this test with all members intact. Una decided she was going to change that. She started with food. The academy provided nutritional supplements tailored to each species. But Una had noticed that her squad mates ate alone and quickly, as if meals were something to endure rather than enjoy. On Earth, meals were sacred, and they were when families came together, and when friends became closer, and when strangers became All eyes, she researched the dietary needs of each species in her squad, and she spent her limited personal credits on ingredients from the Academy Marketplace. The first night she cooked, she invited no one. She simply sat in the squad common room with dishes arranged around her, and she ate slowly and deliberately. Grandish was the first to approach the massive HFY warrior. Stood over her with his scales shifting between curiosity and suspicion. "What is this?" "Dinner," Yuna said, "and there is enough for everyone if you want to join me." "Why would you share food with someone who has been nothing but hostile to you?" Yuna shrugged. "Because I am hungry and eating alone is boring." Grandish stared at her for a long moment, and then he sat down heavily across from her. "Your species is very strange. I know." He ate the protein strips she had prepared for HFY dietary needs, and his scales slowly shifted to a warmer orange. "These are acceptable," from Grandish. That was practically a declaration of love. Sailth joined them the next night, and then Vorith slithered in on the third night seeking the warm dishes. Yuna had learned to prepare for cold-blooded species. The other two cadets remained distant, but Yuna did not push. She had learned patience from her grandmother, who had raised 7 children in a small apartment, and who had always said that family was not born, but built one meal at a time. The meals became routine, and conversations slowly followed. Yuna learned that Grandish had challenged a corrupt commander in the HFY military, and his powerful clan had been stripped of their status as punishment. She learned that Vorith carried genetic knowledge that his government wanted to suppress because it proved their origin mythology was false. She learned that Saileth came from a disgraced family, and that powerful Kithrani wanted her line to end quietly in some forgotten corner of space. Each of them had been sent to Squad 17 to fail. Each of them was a problem. Someone wanted to disappear. Yuna shared her own story, and she told them about Earth and about humanity's struggle to be taken seriously by the galactic community, and about how her failure would close doors for every human who came after her. Grandish's scales shifted to a color she had not seen before. "You carry the weight of your entire species on your shoulders." "I suppose I do." "That is either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both." Saileth made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Humans are strange, but perhaps not as terrible as I initially believed." "That is the nicest thing you have ever said to me. Do not let it go to your head." Physical training was the next challenge. The Academy's combat courses were designed for species with multiple limbs or natural armor or enhanced senses, and Yuna had none of these advantages, but she had something else. She had endurance. On the 17th day of training, the combat instructor pushed the class through an obstacle course designed to exhaust them, and one by one, the cadets collapsed. The Kithrani fell first because their hollow bones were built for short bursts of speed, not sustained effort. The Shellorans withdrew because their crystalline bodies overheated. Without rest, even the mighty HFY eventually dropped to their knees gasping. Yuna kept running. Her legs burned and her lungs screamed, and every part of her body begged her to stop. But she had grown up on a world where gravity crushed and weather killed and predators hunted. She had evolved to endure. When she finally crossed the finish line, she was the only cadet still standing, and the instructor looked at her with something like fear in his eyes. That night in the common room, Grandish approached her with unusual respect in his posture. "How did you do that?" "I just kept going." "But the pain must have been immense." "It was, but pain is temporary, and failure is forever. And I learned that in basic training back on Earth." Varth coiled closer to the heating vent. "Your species is terrifying in ways I had not anticipated." "We prefer the term persistent." Sailor's feathers ruffled with amusement. "I am beginning to understand why the galaxy fears humans." Yuna shook her head. "They should not fear us, and we just want to be part of something bigger than ourselves, and we want to contribute and to belong and to matter." She looked at each of her squad mates. "That is all any of us want, is it not?" Silence fell, and for the first time it was not uncomfortable. The night before his survival evaluation, Una gathered her squad in the common room. Tomorrow they drop us on Glacith, and they expect us to fail, and they expect us to fight each other and to abandon each other and to prove that. Squad 17 deserves to be eliminated. Grendish grunted. And what do you expect? I expect us to survive together, and I have studied each of your strengths and weaknesses, and I have a plan, but it only works if we work as a team. She spread holographic map of Glacith across the table. Grendish, your strength and natural armor make you our front guard, and Voreth, your thermal sensitivity, can detect predators before they see us. And Saleth, your perfect memory, means you can navigate without instruments. She pointed to the others. And I will do whatever needs doing, because humans are generalists and we adapt to fill whatever gaps exist. Saleth studied the map. This could work, but only if we trust each other. Then I guess we need to decide right now if we trust each other. The room was quiet, and then Grendish extended his massive hand toward the center of the table. My clan taught me that shared battle creates bonds stronger than blood, and I have been fighting alone for too long. Varus slithered forward and placed a coil alongside Grendish's hand. My people say that cold kills faster than any enemy, and I am tired of being cold. Saleth placed one of her 4 hands on the pile. The Kithrani believe that memory makes us who we are, and I want to remember this moment as the beginning of something better. Una placed her hand on top. On Earth we say that a family is not born but made, and I think we are making something here. The other 2 cadets watched from the doorway, and after a long moment they stepped forward and added their hands to the pile for the first time Squad 17 was united, and tomorrow they would face the ice together. The transport shuttle descended through clouds of pale violet gas, and Una Park pressed her face against the viewport like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below her stretched the Galactic Union Academy on Verith Prime, and it was more beautiful than any image could capture. Towers of living crystal rose from gardens that glowed with bioluminescent flowers and walkways of polished stone-connected buildings that had stood for 3,000 years. She was about to become the first human to walk those ancient paths. The shuttle landed with a soft hum, and the doors slid open to reveal air that smelled like cinnamon and rain. Una grabbed her single bag and stepped onto the platform where dozens of alien cadets had stopped to stare at her. She recognized some species from her training materials. The tall crystalline beings were Shellorans, and they communicated through patterns of colored light that rippled across their transparent bodies. The feathered bipeds with 4 arms were Kithrani, and they were known for their incredible memories and sharp tongues. The massive reptilian figures were Vokay warriors, and their scales shifted colors based on their emotional state. Right now, every Vokay in sight had scales turning the deep purple of alarm. Una smiled and waved because that was what humans did when they were nervous. The gesture only made more aliens stop and stare. A Shelloran in an instructor's uniform approached her, and the colors dancing through his crystal form suggested irritation mixed with curiosity. Cadet Park, he said through his translator device. I am Commandant Zorvith, and I welcome you to the Academy on behalf of the Galactic Union. Thank you, Commandant. Una replied, I am honored to be here. You are assigned to Squad 17, and your orientation packet has been sent to your neural link, and your roommate is Cadet Saleth of the Kithrani Confederation. He paused, and the colors in his form shifted to something Una could not read. The Academy accepted humanity's application because the Union values diversity, but I will be direct with you, Cadet Park. Please do, sir. Many here believe your species is too primitive and too dangerous to serve alongside civilized beings, and you will need to prove them wrong every single day. Una kept her smile in place, even though her heart was pounding. I understand, sir, and I will do my best. Zorvith made a sound that might have been a laugh. Your best will need to be extraordinary. He turned and walked away, and Una was left alone on the platform with her bag and her dreams and approximately 200 aliens who were looking at her like she might explode at any moment. She found her quarters using the map in her neural link, and the door slid open to reveal a room. Divided precisely in half, one side was bare and waiting, and the other side was decorated with hanging crystals and soft fabrics in shades of blue and silver. A Kithrani stood by the window, and her feathers were pressed flat against her skull in what Yuna's training had taught her was a sign of extreme displeasure. "I am Yuna Park, and I guess we are roommates." The Kithrani turned, and her 4 arms crossed over her chest. "I am Saleth, and I have already submitted the request for transfer. And you should know that nothing personal is meant by this." "Then why request the transfer?" Saleth's feathers ruffled slightly. "Because humans are Deathworlders, and your species evolved on a planet with extreme gravity and predators and temperature. Variations that would kill most beings, and you consume chemical stimulants daily, and bond with predator species as companions, and can function for days without sleep." She paused, and her voice dropped. "Frankly, you terrify me." Yuna set her bag on her bed and sat down slowly so she would not seem threatening. "I understand, and I want you to know that I've never eaten a roommate before." Saleth stared at her. Was that humor? It was an attempt at humor, yes. Kithrani do not find consumption jokes amusing. "I will remember that." Saleth's feathers relaxed just slightly. "The transfer request will likely be denied because Commandant Zorvith has a specific vision for Squad 17, and apparently we are all part of it. What do you mean?" "You will see at the squad meeting tomorrow." Yuna did see, and what she saw concerned her deeply. Squad 17 gathered in the training room the next morning, and it was immediately obvious that something was wrong. There were 6 cadets, including Yuna, and not one of them looked happy to be there. Saleth stood as far from the others as possible, and her feathers were still flat with stress. A massive Verkai warrior named Grendish occupied one corner, and his scales were the dull gray of someone who had given up hope. A small serpentine Deshan named Larath coiled near the heating vent, and his cold-blooded body clearly struggled with the room's temperature. 2 other cadets completed the group, and they were species Yuna did not recognize, but they shared the same defeated posture as everyone else. The instructor who arrived was a scarred Kithrani with missing feathers on one side of his face. "I am Instructor Cavil, and I will be honest with you because there is no point in lying." He looked at each of them in turn. "Squad 17 has been ranked last in the academy for 3 consecutive years, and no squad member has ever graduated, and most have been expelled or have withdrawn voluntarily." Grendish made a rumbling sound. "Then why do they keep forming the squad?" "Because the academy needs a place to put cadets that certain powerful people want to fail quietly, and you have each been placed here deliberately, and you have each been set up to be removed from consideration for officer positions." Silence filled the room. Yuna raised her hand. "Why are you telling us this?" Instructor Cavil looked at her with something that might have been respect. "Because I was in Squad 17 30 years ago, and I survived only because I was too stubborn to give them what they wanted." He moved toward the door. "Your first evaluation is in 1 week, and it is an academic examination covering military history and tactics, and no Squad 17 has ever passed." He paused at the threshold. "Prove them wrong." Then he was gone, and the 6 cadets were left staring at each other. Grendish spoke first. "I do not work with prey species." Saleth's feathers flared. "I do not work with beings who consider me food." Varth hissed softly. "I do not work with warmbloods who cannot understand proper thermal dynamics." The 2 other cadets simply shook their heads and walked out. Yuna watched them go, and she felt something settling in her chest. It was the same feeling she had gotten when her drill sergeant back on Earth had told her she would never make it through basic training. It was stubbornness. "Well," she said to the remaining cadets, who were already moving toward the door, I guess I will see you at the examination." That night she lay in her bed and listened to Sayla's soft breathing from across the room. Through the window she could see the Academy's famous crystal spire glowing against the stars. She had come so far, and she would not let this place break her. She would not let them win. But as she drifted towards sleep, she heard voices in the corridor outside, and she recognized Commandant Zorvith's crystalline tones. "The human will not last a month," he was saying. "And when she fails, we will have justification to deny all future human applications permanently." Another voice responded with amusement, "And the others in Squad 17. Acceptable losses, and their removal benefits many powerful families who have contributed generously to the Academy's future." Footsteps faded, and Yuna lay in the darkness with her heart pounding. They were not just expecting her to fail, they were counting on it. And in that moment she made a decision that would change everything. She was going to succeed not just for herself, but for every cadet they had tried to throw away. She was going to drag Squad 17 to graduation if it killed her. And maybe, just maybe, she was going to burn their rotten system to the ground.